You have nothing to hide. You know that. You are certain of it. So when the investigator sits down across from you and asks you to walk them through what happened, you do exactly what an honest person does. You talk, you explain, you fill every silence because silence feels like suspicion and you are not suspicious. You are innocent and you want them to know that. And that is exactly where it starts to go wrong. What you are about to hear is not about guilty people trying to escape consequences. It is about innocent people, people who did nothing wrong, people who had every reason to feel safe, who walked into an investigative conversation and walked out as the primary suspect. Not because they lied, because of what they did when they were telling the truth. The science behind this is some of the most disturbing research in modern psychology, and once you understand it, you will never look at an interrogation room the same way again. Start with the silence. The average person cannot tolerate more than 4 seconds of silence in a conversation before they feel compelled to fill it. 4 seconds. Researchers at the University of Groningen studied this exact threshold and found that even brief conversational silences trigger a cascade of social anxiety, a feeling that something is wrong, that you have failed, that you need to fix it. In a normal conversation, that instinct is harmless. In an investigative interview, it is a weapon. Trained investigators know about those 4 seconds. They use them deliberately. They ask a question, get your answer, and then they say nothing. Hold the silence. Your brain, running its ancient social anxiety algorithm, interprets that silence as dissatisfaction, as doubt, as a signal that your answer was not enough. So you keep going. You add details. You qualify statements you already made. You circle back to things you said 2 minutes ago and explain them differently. To you, this feels like being helpful. To an investigator watching your behavior, it looks like something else entirely. Here is what they are trained to see.
When people tell the truth from memory, their accounts have a specific texture. They are imperfect. They skip around, they contain irrelevant details, the color of a shirt, the sound of traffic outside, the smell of coffee, because real memory records the whole environment, not just the narrative. A truthful account contradicts itself in small ways because human memory is reconstructive, not recorded. It is rebuilt fresh every time it is accessed, and the rebuilding process is never perfect. But when an innocent person is terrified of being disbelieved, something changes. They start editing. They start smoothing. They tell their story again and again in their head before they say it out loud, trying to make sure it sounds credible, trying to remove anything that might seem inconsistent. By the time they open their mouth, the account is cleaner than any real memory has a right to be. It is too linear, too complete, too rehearsed. And that is the first innocent mistake. Trying to sound believable makes you sound less believable. Psychologist Saul Kassin at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice has spent decades studying exactly this phenomenon. His research identified what he calls the innocence problem, the counterintuitive finding that innocent people are actually more likely than guilty people to waive their right to silence and agree to speak with investigators without legal representation. Why? Because they believe the truth will protect them. They think that if they just explain clearly enough, the investigator will see they have nothing to hide and let them go.
What they do not understand is that the investigator is not listening to what they are saying. They are watching how they are saying it. Now add stress to that equation. Your heart rate climbs the moment you sit in that chair, not because you are guilty, because the situation itself is threatening. Your palms sweat, your eye contact becomes inconsistent, sometimes too intense because you are trying to prove your honesty, sometimes breaking away because the sustained eye contact starts to feel unnatural. Your voice does things you cannot control. It rises slightly at the end of sentences that should be statements, turning them into questions without you realizing it. You start hedging, using phrases like, I believe, if I remember correctly, I think it was around, because your anxious brain is trying to be precise and accurate. But to an untrained observer, those qualifiers sound like uncertainty about things you should know for certain if you were really there. This is what psychologist Richard Leo, who has studied false confessions for over 30 years, calls the stress contamination of innocent testimony. The physiological response to being investigated is almost identical to the physiological response to being guilty. And the behaviors that anxiety produces, the hedging, the inconsistent eye contact, the over-explanation, the voice changes, are the same behaviors that popular culture has spent decades teaching people to associate with deception. You are not lying, but you are performing every behavioral signal that says you are. And then comes the memory trap.
Investigators are trained to ask the same question multiple times across different points in the conversation, not because they forgot your answer, because they are testing for consistency. A rehearsed false account tends to be highly consistent. The liar has practiced it, locked it in, and delivers it the same way every time. A genuine memory, however, shifts slightly with each telling. Details appear that were not there before. The order of events adjusts. Small contradictions emerge. For an innocent person trying desperately to be consistent, this is devastating because you notice the slight differences between your first answer and your third. You notice that you said the meeting was at 2 o'clock the first time and 2:30 the second time. Now you are trying to correct yourself, to reconcile the contradiction, to explain why the times are slightly different. And the more you explain, the more it looks like you are constructing a story rather than remembering one.
You are experiencing what researcher Gisli Gudjonsson, who spent a career studying false confessions at King's College London, identified as interrogative suggestibility, the tendency for people under the psychological pressure of an investigation to become uncertain about their own memories, to second-guess what they know, and to become vulnerable to having their recollection shaped by the questions being asked of them. A simple question phrased slightly differently can cause you to doubt a memory you were certain of 60 seconds ago. Now consider what happens when the investigator introduces information. This is a legal technique in many jurisdictions. An investigator can tell you things that are not true. They can say your phone was tracked to a location. They can say a witness placed you somewhere. They can say physical evidence exists that does not exist. And your brain, already destabilized by stress, already second-guessing your own memory, starts to do something remarkable and terrifying. It starts to wonder.
Were you there? You are certain you were not. But they seem so sure. And your memory of that night is not perfectly clear. You were tired, it was weeks ago. You were not paying close attention because you had no reason to. What if you are misremembering? What if something happened that you do not fully recall? Kassin's research documented cases where psychologically healthy, innocent adults began to doubt their own alibis after sustained questioning. Not because investigators broke them down violently, because the slow, methodical application of doubt to an already anxious mind can cause it to turn against its own certainties. This is how innocent people confess to things they did not do. Not through force, through the systematic exploitation of the exact behaviors and cognitive vulnerabilities that honest, cooperative, well-meaning people display when they believe transparency will save them. So here is what the research actually says you should do. Not to protect guilt, to protect innocence.
Criminal defense attorneys and behavioral scientists agree on one principle with almost no exceptions. Before you speak to any investigator about any matter in which you are not certain of your exact legal status, you request the presence of legal representation. Not because you have something to hide, because every cognitive vulnerability described in this video, the silence trap, the stress contamination, the memory inconsistency, the suggestibility, disappears or is dramatically reduced when you are not navigating that room alone. An attorney is not a shield for the guilty. They are a stabilizer for the innocent. The most dangerous sentence you can say in an investigative interview is not a lie. It is, I have nothing to hide, so I'll just explain. Because you walked into that room certain the truth would protect you, and you did not know that the truth, delivered by an anxious human brain under sustained psychological pressure, does not always look like the truth. It looks like exactly what they were already looking for.